All right. Good to see you. We got Paul and Lonnie here on the computer. We have Alex and Marina here with us in person. And we'll see. Maybe some more of our friends will join us. Maybe some unsuspecting poor people coming early to annual meeting might join us toward the end. We'll see what happens. We find ourselves on Yud Amid Beis on 10b. And we are picking up with a discussion talking about Noi Sukkah, which is decorations in the sukkah. Now, in general, we said having decorations are not a problem because they actually, even though they take up space, they're enhancing the experience and they're not considered to be mafsik, to interpose between you and the cover that your schach is providing. However, we'll see momentarily that's not so clear. So let's get into the Gemara. We have a bit of a story. I mean, don't get too excited. It's not that much of a story. Minyamin Avdei Rav Ashi. So the certain Rav Ashi, his name was Minyamin. Itmisha le kutunta b'maya veshtatcha ametal asa. So he takes a piece of clothing and he dries it out by laying it on the sukkah. So Amar le Rav Ashi, Dalia, Dolemer kom misachi with Makabel Tuma. Remove it, take it off of the sukkah, because people don't realize that you're drying out the clothing. They're going to think that you're actually using it as schach, and this is not kosher schach. Aren't they going to see that the clothing is wet? You put it out in the sun in order to dry it. So he clarifies, I'm discussing when it is dry. Welcome, Toby. Good to have you with us. We only want, yeah. No, I started on the dot. I guess starting on the dot is early. I only went one. I have to end on the dot, but I only went one line in. I can repeat it very quickly. So, all right, for your benefits, I know you're always on time. So so we're on the top of 10b. Thank you for joining us. All right, Yud Amid Beis 10b. So let me just quickly recap what we did. We only went one little section in, and we learned. Oh, good. You guys both have the article, so you can cross-reference with each other. We learned that there is an issue that if you take something that's non-kosher schach and you put it on top of the schach in a way that the public will think that you are using it as schach, that's an issue. Now, I don't see the word Tamaris ayin invoked here directly, though it would appear perhaps to be a Maris ayin issue. Maris ayin being the problem, you're not supposed to do something that has to look at propriety. So, for instance, and propriety, I don't mean to be really terrible, but I mean the Gemara in Shabbos tells us that if you have two entryways to your house, you have to put one in the front and one menorah in the front and one menorah in the back, lest people coming on one side think that you're not celebrating Hanukkah. So he doesn't mention Maris Ayin, though that appears to be the issue here. Okay, we're up to the words Itmar. Itmar. No, unless I'm just curious. Yeah, it's okay. My computer. I was looking at my computer. Just coordinated with my phone. Okay. Amar, Itmar. Noi sukkah hamuflagim arba. Let's say your decorations are 4 tfachim from the actual schach. They're further away from the schach. So that could actually present an issue potentially. So Rav Nachman Amar Kisher, Rav Nachman says decorations are categorically not an issue. However, Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna Amrei Psula. It's puzzle. Now, what's their issue? Why? Who cares once it hits 4 tfachim? So Rashi explains. Rashi says, "Dibor Maskal Psula mishum ohel masik veshtachach delo gani b'sukkah." So basically, once it's 4 tfachim down, it creates some kind of mini ohel, a mini tent. And you're no longer being protected by the schach per se, you're being protected by the decorations. And here's another story. This one has a little bit more of a narrative to it that brings out their machlokas. Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna iklu lebei reish galusa. So they went to visit, I think they call in English, the exilarch, right? The exilarch. So he's was a chashuva person. Agininhu Rav Nachman Sukkah shenoya muflag mena arba tfachim. Now, notice the names over here. Remember, Rav Nachman was the one who said that decorations are categorically not an issue. So Nachman puts them in a sukkah, which there are decorations hanging more than 4 tefachim down. Ishtiku, and they were silent. They didn't protest it. Lo amar lev lo midi. So Amar Lahu, Rav Nachman says, it looks like the rabbis retracted their position. Seems like you're fine with decorations that are more than 4 tefachim down. Why didn't you complain? Why didn't you protest this? So Amar Le, very, very important concept that we will get to in the second parak of Sukkah in depth. Anan shluchei mitzvah anan ubetur min sukkah. We are shluchei mitzvah. We are on a mission to perform a mitzvah, and therefore we are patur from the mitzvah of sukkah. Now, what mitzvah were they fulfilling? So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, what was their mitzvah? Lahakbel pnei rosh gola. They were visiting the exilarch. And dechayiv adam lahakbel pnei rabba beregel. Because there's a mitzvah. One is supposed to visit their Rebbe. One is supposed to visit their Rebbe on the holidays. So therefore, they were patur because they're shluchei mitzvah b'tur min sukkah. So there actually is a very interesting opinion out there, Rasher, I'm forgetting precisely which Rishon, that it's like a hutra, you're completely patur from all sorts of different mitzvahs. But the general conventional understanding is that if you are involved in one mitzvah and you can only do that mitzvah, it exempts you from other mitzvahs at the same time. Very interesting point from Rav Elchanan Wasserman. This is like the one thing I'm going to supplement tonight because I want to make sure we get this in the right amount of time. So the Kovei Shiurim, Rav Elchanan Wasserman, points out that later on we're going to get to a Mishnah that tells us that someone who is sick, so he and those who are tending to him are exempt from having to go into a sukkah. So those who are exempt from going into, those who are tending to him, why are they exempt? Because they are osik ben mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Since they are already involved in the midst of caring for this person who is ill, who needs their attention, if that person can't be in the sukkah, they're not expected to go into the sukkah either. But the question is, why is the person who is sick not chayiv to go into the sukkah? So one, there's different reasons that Tesha came to Duru, but Rav Elchanan Wasserman says, "Lefizeh gam bechola atzmo shayach taima to osef mitzvah. The mitzvahs hashavas gufo gam ola didei ramya." The same way those tending to him have a mitzvah to tend to someone's health, and therefore they're exempt from going into the sukkah. When we tend to our own health, we are being osek in a mitzvah of tending to our own health and care. And therefore, we also, if for some reason going into the sukkah, whatever it is, maybe it's the heat, maybe it's whatever the reason is, it's going to be detrimental to our health, we also are osek in the mitzvah of protecting our health, and we're patur from the mitzvah. So that's what Elchanan Wasserman says. I think the same svara also comes up in the infamous Chuvos of the Besamim Rosh. Have you ever heard of the Besamim Rosh? Yeah. So.
Name, but I don't know.
So which Rishon does it sound like? Whose Chuvos does it sound like it belongs to? Sounds like it belongs to the Rush, right? That's what you would think. That's who was falsely attributed to. It was a forgery. I forgot exactly the name of the person who did it, but it's not as long ago as the Rush. It was falsely attributed to him. And the funny thing is, kind of what raised some people's eyebrows is that he has a lot of chuvos in there, that very wild, very liberal kind of svaros in there. So some people finally cracked the case and figured out it was a forgery. Anyway, he gives a similar svara, but since we know Rav Elchanan Wasserman says it, we know we're in good hands. Okay. And the crazy thing about the Sam Rosh is that he gets quoted in lots of halachic literature. So, what do you do when something gets quoted in all sorts of halachic literature? It becomes part of our normative halacha, and then you realize it's all based on a book that's a forgery. It's a big question. It's also, now some will argue that it's not that the Zohar was a forgery, the Zohar was a pseudo-epigraphic text. Okay, whatever you want to understand it. But the Zohar, according to most historians, was not authored certainly not directly by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So if it was only, authored or collected by a guy named Moses de Leon, who lived during the medieval times, then, why does it carry as much authority as people attribute to it? So, what? It's very much related, right? It's very much related to our Thursday morning discussion about what happens when you discover that something's of later and less authoritative authorship, yet we base a lot of our theology on it. What do you do with that? Beyond the scope of our Gemara here, just raising that. Okay. Back into the Gemara, my friends. We up to the words Amar Rav Yehuda, new section. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Mutter Lishon Bikila Besukkah Avapi Sheish Lagag Ushina Gavo Asar. So what is a kila? Let me show you a picture. I believe I have a picture of a kila right over here. Leave my if the Gemara gives it to me, unless this art scroll. Oh, art scroll gives you a picture. See, you guys have art scrolls. You see it? Yeah. Right, but it's important what kind of canopy we're talking about. It's a triangular one, right? No, sorry, not triangular one. Sorry, this is what we're looking at. And for those on the computer, if you don't have an art scroll, right? So we're going to see in a moment. It's similar to a case we had in the Mishnah. So right, it's a full roof. Okay, right, not the triangular. My mistake. So I'm confusing it with what's going to come up next week's Gemara. Right. So if you look at Rashi tells us what's a kila haprusa svivos hamita. It has canopy that is spread all over the different all around the bed, just like in the pictures that you see. So ava pisheish lagag, even though as you see it has a roof interposing between you and between the snaf. So when is that okay? As long as it's not 10 tefachim tall. What's 10 tefachim tall? It's its own domain, right? It's a makom b'fnei atzur. Because remember in halacha, we said this ad nauseum. 10 tefachim is the threshold for something to consider its own area, its own structure. So long as this kila, the roof of it, doesn't exceed 10 tefachim, so then we are in a good place. We have a brayso that tells us that you can never sleep in a kila. What do you think the answer is? Well, in that brayso, when it says you can't sleep in a kila, it's talking about a kila that's 10 tefachim tall. But if it's less than 10 tefachim tall, it would be okay. We're going to do the same thing like 3 times over. But it was also taught that someone who sleeps under a bed, right? So you're sleeping under a bed or a double decker, whatever it is, inside a sukkah. You're also not yotzi yechiyah because the bed is interposing between you and between the snach. So what's the answer? Shmuel will just have to add in a detail. What kind of bed is it talking about? When it's 10 tefachim tall. Tashima, again, Oship here's agavi kinofos. We learned, right, in our Mishnah, that if you spread it over the kinofos, the 4-cornered bed, so then it's basula. Hasanami, the Gvia Sarah. What's the answer? In our Mishnah, when it says that it's an issue, it's only when it's 10 tefachim tall. But if it's less than 10 tefachim, you're still considered to be within the sukkah. V'halo katani hachi Titania naklitin shnayim. Ukinofos are right? Naklitin were the 2-pole ones, and the kinofos are the 4-pole covered beds. So piris agavi kinofos psula. The 4-corner bed is categorically always going to be an issue if you sleep under the 4-corner bed. But agavi naklitin kishera b'vashlehu naklitin gavoa min hamita asara. But the 2-poled bed covering is okay provided it's less than 10 tefachim. Michlal. To kinofos afabishina gavon asara. This would imply that kinofos, even when they're not 10 tefachim tall, they are always going to be an issue. If so, a kila should also be an issue if it's less than 10 tefachim. Mm-hmm. So the answer is shani kinofos tikvi. Kinofos are different. When you have like that 4-poled, was there a special name for those beds in English? What do we call those things? 4-poster bed. Okay, very good. So I thought maybe there's some elaborate, fancy English term or Victorian term for it. Okay, whatever it is. So I like that. It's straight and to the point. It's what it sounds like. A 4-post bed. So when you have a 4-post bed, that's more established than just sticking up one pole at one and one pole at the other end. So there, even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's going to be an issue. But wait a minute. Remember last week we learned a very important principle. As Phyllis told us, kibolo kach polto. It's like that. The way a sukkah becomes kosher is the way it becomes pasul. What is the minimum height for a sukkah? 10 tefachim. So now what's the minimum height for a sukkah on top of a sukkah to render the lower one pasul? If the top sukkah has 10 tefachim, so then it's called a sukkah on top of a sukkah, right? By definition. So there we see to make a sukkah, you need 10 tefachim. Where even though a sukkah is kavua, is established. So where do we get this idea that even less than 10 tefachim is an issue if it's something that is kavua, if it's established? So what's the difference? So here's the little nuance. Hacha l'shavi ohala, sorry, hacha d'misal sukkah ba'asara. There, if you want to disqualify the entire sukkah under the top one, you need 10 tefachim in order to make it a real bona fide structure that renders the entire sukkah under a puzzle. But here, in the case of the in the case of the kinofos of the four-post bed, where you're not actually disqualifying the entire sukkah, you're just saying that this little section of the sukkah that has a little bit of a mini ohel, has a tent inside the sukkah, just this section you can't sleep in or sit in the sukkah. So there, since it's a much lower threshold because we're not doing something as fantastic. We're not rendering the entire sukkah puzzle. We're just saying this one area in the sukkah, you're not going to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. So there, batzer me'asar nami havi ohala. So there, even less than 10 tefachim still constitutes a tent for these purposes. Okay, deep breath. Questions, my friends? Got lots of questions. It was a little bit of a quick ping pong over there. Okay, the point, Paul, I see a hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Before you go to the next subject, can you give a little elucidation on how far the concept goes of I thought for one mitzvah if you're performing another mitzvah? Sounds like a huge loophole from lots of obligations.
Yes. So Paul asked a very excellent question, and Be'ezras Hashem, when we do get to, I think it's Daf Chav Hey, we will address it more in depth. But there is an overarching principle that is, you know what's funny? So in these Masifta Gemaras, what they do is they have like mini encyclopedia entries in the back that take the major topics that come up in the Masechta, and they give you like a whole encyclopedic entry on anything you ever wanted. So one of them actually is on this question of osik mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. But basically, the idea is that the conventional assumption is that if I'm in the middle of mitzvah A, I'm exempt from doing mitzvah B if I am not able to perform both at the same time. So, for instance, if I need to tend to my child and it's impossible for me to daven, so then I be pater from davening while I'm tending to, something like that. So there are exceptions, though. One of the major exceptions is Talmud Torah. We say that if there's a mitzvah that's efshir lasis ayadei acherim, then no one else can do that mitzvah. So you need to help that old lady cross the street. Okay, right. You're right, or whatever the mitzvah is, and you are the only one who's able to do it, and you're middle studying Torah. You have to close your Gemara. We actually talked about this at the beginning of Masechtas Megillah, right? That when Mikra Megillah comes, you're expected to stop learning to listen to the Megillah. So we talked about a whole hierarchy of certain mitzvahs that supersede other mitzvahs, right? So there's a whole different kind of rules. But the Steipler basically suggests that when it comes to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, right? You think about it. We say it every morning. We say Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Talmud Torah, you have all these mitzvahs on one side, you have Talmud Torah on the other side. Yet Talmud Torah supersedes everything else. How could that possibly be that Talmud Torah, which is greater than all these other mitzvahs, could just be superseded by almost any other mitzvah? So the idea the Steipler says is, when am I obligated in the mitzvah of Torah study? When I have zman panoi, when I have some available time. But the pshat is, when there's another mitzvah that requires my attention, my time is no longer available. So it's not that the other mitzvahs supersede the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It's that when there's another mitzvah, I'm not obligated in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah at that point. Now, some people, not yourselves, obviously, because you're all here at Shir, they just hold that they're always being osik. And I'm always being osik in the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh. Like I'm always so then they're never chayiv in Talmud Torah.
You have to do work a certain hour. And 1 hour in the morning. And
right. Right.
Or daven.
Yeah. Well, if it's not always as clear cut, but I'm not sure if it might be I understand an abstract level to a question. On a practical level, many people exercise and they listen to a shir on Torah when they do it. Right. Yeah. Oh, davening. So you're saying
to what extent can you like your health?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so these are when rabbis turn to the doctors to be kovea. If like a doctor says if Ruvain does not get in that 1 hour of exercise in the morning, they are very likely to get a heart attack or something, God forbid. So if the doctor is kovea for, oh sorry, was that too? Oh, okay. I'm sorry if that was like too. I should give like, okay, I'm sorry. Right. So basically, if the doctor says that, and so if the doctor is kovea that there's a sakana over here, then we defer to the doctors to be kovea when there's a sakana. So that's
but not just generally getting involved.
But
yeah.
You could see.
You also right. Sleep less. You also have to figure out, how much of davening you actually have to say, right? Because if you're like, if you really have no time on your hands, really all you're saying is Berachos Hashachar, Berachos Kriya Shema Shmona Esrei. Like if you really need to, if you're in those dire circumstances, skip Sukkah to Zimra, right? Now, obviously, ideally you say all the things, but Tachlan was the Takanas Haga Onim. So, there a lot of these things that are in the liturgy, while we should say in Lechatchila, when someone's in tight circumstances, they can forego it. So, there's ways to make it work. But if the doctor's kovea that if you don't get your exercise in, you're, God forbid something terrible will happen, we trust the doctor on that. Yeah. Yeah, that's how we. And also, there's an interesting discussion about can you yourself be kovea that you feel that your health is in danger. We have an idea on Yom Kippur. We say lev yodei amaris nafsho, that even if a doctor says you'll be okay if you don't fast, if you do fast, then but you say I know I'm going to die, God forbid, or whatever, something terrible will happen. So the Gemara actually says something very fascinating. Lev yodei amaris nafsho, that one's heart knows, because a doctor can only look at different criteria. You know how you truly feel. And when we do the shir on the topic of istinus, God willing, there's a similar debate over there. Can anyone just say, I'm an istinus, I feel very uncomfortable in the heat, therefore I should be able to shower during Shiva, during the 9 days, on Yom Kippur, whatever it might be. No, not true. Thinking of a Saurus, maybe. Okay, well, androgynous. You're thinking? Oh, but that's someone who has both genitalia. Yeah, but yeah, all these different Greek sounding words. Yeah, no. Actually, I mean, actually, like this is probably there's a word in Greek that sounds very similar to it that means someone who's like in pain and very sensitive. But you remember that they were both Greek, so that's good. Okay, let's wrap this up before our meeting starts. We only have 7 minutes left. Okay, final part, guys. We're in the final section. This one, because then we could smoothly go right in. All right, so people have to listen to some Torah when they come to shul. Right? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, so let's finish this up. I have to be here at the beginning also. I'm leading as right comes gone. Amarav Tachlifa bar Avimi Amar Shmuel Hayoshi Bekila Aramotzi Rosha Chutz Lakila Bekori Kriyashma. So someone's in this kila. So let's say that they're not properly clothed. So then what they're able to do is they can stick their head out, and that way they recite Kriya Shema. Meisve, but is that really true? Is that like, I'm considered clothed? As long as I stick my head out, that's okay. And there's no issue of erva, and I could say Shema. So Meisve Hayashi Bekila Arum Lo Yotzi Rosh Chutzakia Vikar Kriya Shema. We have a brisa that seems to say exactly the opposite. That if you stick your head out, that's not sufficient. It's like it's like you're completely still within the kila. Everything good? Okay. It's like you're completely still within the kila. So how do we resolve this contradiction? Kishagova asara. Right. Getting back to our concept from before. When 1 kila is 10 tefachim tall, it's considered its own room. You can't say the kila is like a piece of clothing enveloping you. It's like your own room. So sticking your head out doesn't help. It's like you're still completely in that room, and it's not considered a covering for Shema purposes. And in fact, the continuation of the brisa indicates as much. So the brisa says, what is this comparable to? to one who's in a house and sticks their head out, so as to cover the rest of their body with the house. That ain't gonna work because that's not called a piece of clothing. That's called your body's in the house. You're not considered covered. So that's the point that's being made. Again, the same principle. 10 tefachim renders something a structure. Now, just briefly going on to Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, as a parenthetical, in truth, Ubayis Nami, Alpha Pishen Gavo Asara, Kavan de Gvia Oalahu Dolgarmi Kinofos. Remember we said Kinofos, that the 4-post bed, even if it's less than 10 tefachim, it's enough to, if since Kavua is considered its own structure, house, certainly a house is Kavua, right? You don't get more established than a house. So if a house, in theory, even if it's less than 10 tefachim, you would still have this issue. You would not be considered covered. You would not be allowed to say Shema. But if it was not a house, it was, like a kila or something which was not a real kavua structure, and it was less than 10 tefachim, we would view it as if it's like a shirt that's covering you, and you'd be allowed to say Shema in such an instance. So that brings us, my friends, to the top of Yud Aleph and Aleph. It brings us to 7:26 p.m. with 4 minutes to spare before the annual meeting. We did it, Rabbosai. Shkoyach. Okay, thank you all. Okay, good seeing you all on the computer. Take care. Good Shabbos to all.